In-laws gift us useless gifts, but now they move house and need money in demand. We repay for everything. The text came at 2 a.m., buzzing Sarah's phone like a hornet in the dead of night. We need $10,000 by Friday, or we lose the house. You owe us for all we've given you. She stared at the screen, her heart sinking as if it had been dropped into a cold, dark well. For years, her parents had showered her and Tom with useless gifts, gaudy trinkets, and cheap knickknacks, while subtly hinting they were generous saints. Now, with their own finances crumbling, they were demanding repayment for every last tacky vase and chipped figurine, as if love could be tallied like a grocery bill. Sarah and Tom had been married for 5 years, building a modest but happy life in their cozy Chicago apartment. They weren't rich, but they were content, scraping by on Tom's teacher salary and Sarah's freelance graphic design gigs. Her parents, Ellen and George, lived an hour away in a sprawling suburban house they'd always flaunted as a symbol of their success. Every holiday, birthday, or random visit came with a gift wrapped in garish paper, a neon green ceramic rooster that clashed with their minimalist decor, a sequin throw pillow that shed glitter like a disco ball, a photo frame so ornate it looked like it belonged in a haunted mansion. Sarah would smile, thank them, and tuck the items into a closet they jokingly called the Museum of Parental Generosity. Tom would roll his eyes but stay quiet, not wanting to stir the pot. The gifts weren't the problem, at least. Not at first. It was the strings attached, invisible but heavy, like spiderwebs clinging to your skin. Ellen would say things like, "We spent so much on that vase. Sarah, you'd better use it." Or George would chuckle, "That's real crystal. You know, don't say we never did anything for you." Sarah felt the weight of their expectations, but she brushed it off. They were her parents. They meant well, didn't they? The trouble started when Ellen and George announced they were selling their house to move to Florida. A fresh start, Ellen had said over dinner 6 months ago, her voice bubbly as she passed the mashed potatoes. "The market's hot, and we'll downsize to something chic by the beach." Sarah had nodded, happy for them, even as Tom squeezed her hand under the table, sensing something off. George's real estate business had been faltering for years, and Ellen's spending habits designer bags. Gourmet cooking classes hadn't slowed. Sarah had overheard whispers of debt, but her parents always waved it away with a laugh. "We're fine, sweetie," Ellen would say, adjusting her gold bracelet. "Don't worry about us." But now the facade was cracking. The house sale fell through when the market tanked, and their chic Florida condo required a deposit they didn't have. That's when the texts started. First, it was Ellen calling to check in, her voice syrupy but edged with panic. Then George, blunt as ever, sent a spreadsheet titled "Contributions to Sarah and Tom, 2018-2025. Every gift, every dinner they'd hosted, every favor was listed with a dollar amount: $75 for the rooster, $120 for the vase, $50 for a set of monogrammed towels they'd never used. The total $12,347. "We need you to step up," George wrote. "Family helps family." Sarah felt like she'd been slapped. She sat on the couch, the spreadsheet glowing on her laptop, her hands trembling. Tom paced the living room, his usual calm replaced by a quiet fury. "They're keeping score," he said, his voice low but sharp. "All those years. They made it seem like they were giving out of love. And now it's a debt." Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't. Her parents had always been overbearing, but this was a betrayal she hadn't seen coming. The next day, they drove to her parents' house, the car silent except for the hum of the engine. Sarah's stomach churned with a mix of guilt and defiance. She loved her parents, but this demand felt like a violation, a rewriting of their relationship into a cold transaction. Tom, usually the peacemaker, was resolute. "We're not paying for their bad decisions," he said, gripping the steering wheel, "but we'll hear them out." The house was a mess when they arrived, boxes half-packed, furniture shoved into corners, Ellen's prized crystal collection bubble-wrapped on the dining table. George sat at the head of the table, his face flushed, while Ellen hovered, wringing her hands. "You're here," she said. Her smile forced. Good. We need to talk. The conversation was a slow-motion disaster. George launched into a lecture about loyalty, how they'd sacrificed for Sarah's wedding, her college, her life. Ellen chimed in, her voice breaking as she listed the gifts they'd given. We thought you'd appreciate them, she said, tears welling. But if you can't help us now, when we're losing everything, she trailed off, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to remind them that they'd never asked for those gifts, that they'd begged her parents to stop. Instead, she said, Mom, Dad, we don't have $10,000. We're barely covering our own bills. Tom nodded, his jaw tight. And even if we did, this isn't fair. You can't put a price on family. George slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal clink. Fair. You think it's fair we're losing our home while you sit on all we've given you? His voice rose, accusing. You're ungrateful. Both of you. Ellen sobbed harder, but Sarah noticed her mother's eyes dart to George, as if checking his performance. It felt rehearsed, manipulative. The argument spiraled. Sarah tried to stay calm, but her voice cracked as she recounted years of feeling pressured, judged, controlled by their generosity. Tom backed her up, his words measured but firm. You gave us things we didn't want and now expect us to bail you out. That's not love. That's a transaction. George stormed out, muttering about disloyal kids. Ellen stayed, pleading, but her words felt hollow. Driving home, Sarah cried not for her parents, but for the loss of the relationship she'd thought they had. Tom reached for her hand, his anger softened by worry. We'll figure this out, he said, but we're not their ATM. Over the next week, Sarah wrestled with guilt. Should they help? Even a little. Her parents had paid for her college. After all, though they'd held it over her head ever since. But giving in now felt like rewarding their manipulation, setting a precedent for more demands. They decided to offer a compromise, $2,000, the most they could spare, without jeopardizing their own stability. Sarah wrote a letter, her words careful but honest. We love you, but we can't carry your burdens. This is what we can do, but it's not repayment, it's a gift, because that's what family does. She mailed it with a check, her heart heavy but resolute. Ellen called, furious, saying it wasn't enough. George sent another text. Don't bother visiting if that's all we're worth. Sarah didn't respond. She couldn't. Instead, she and Tom started donating the useless gifts to charity, each one a small act of reclaiming their freedom. The ceramic rooster went first, its chipped beak a symbol of their broken trust. Months passed. Ellen and George managed to sell their house at a loss and move to a modest apartment. Not the Florida condo they dreamed of. They stopped contacting Sarah, and she stopped reaching out. The silence was painful but liberating. She and Tom focused on their own life, hosting friends in their clutter-free apartment, laughing without the weight of expectation. Sarah realized family wasn't about keeping score. It was about mutual respect, something her parents had never offered. The experience changed her. She started volunteering at a community center, helping families navigate financial stress. She saw her parents' mistakes in others' pride, denial, entitlement, and vowed never to let those traits define her. Tom supported her, their bond stronger for weathering the storm together. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. What do you think were Sarah and Tom right to set boundaries, or should they have done more for her parents? Share your thoughts on where the line between family duty and personal responsibility lies. And